Emmett Till, Fred Hampton, Rodney King, Amadou Diallo, Sean Bell, Walter Scott, Eric Garner, Freddie Gray, Michael Brown Jr., Tamir Rice, Oscar Grant, Philando Castile, Akai Gurley, Samuel DuBose, Timothy Stansbury, Dontre Hamilton, Trayvon Martin, John Crawford III, Ezell Ford, Dante Parker, Tanisha Anderson, Jeremy Reed, Botham Jean, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd. These are just a few names in the countless number of people who have been senselessly killed behind racial injustice. We are a community that is under attack in America. And what makes it worse is that police officers behind these shootings have not faced criminal charges for murder because the system is broken. If you watch the news, you've seen these stories, you know these names. Many of these folks had no weapon, were not doing anything but just living, and their only crime was being Black in America. Mappingtheviolence.org, I highly encourage you to check out this website. It says that Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. Levels of violent crime in the U.S. do not determine the rates of police violence. Violent crime is lower than the instances of police violence against African Americans. 99% of killings by police from the years 2013 to 2019 have not resulted in officers being charged with a crime. Just in 2019 alone, the police killed 1,099 people across the United States. In 2016, when Donald Trump got elected to president, even when he was running his campaign, he unleashed a new era of injustice, bigotry, and blatant attacks against minorities, unlike this generation has ever seen. It started when rallies looked more like Klan meetings. Trump said he would pay the legal fees of anyone bold enough to accost or assault anyone who was anti-Trump at those rallies. The young man Dylan Roof shot 9 people at a church, a Bible study in Charleston, South Carolina. Neo-Nazis invaded a peaceful rally with torches.
I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have, you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
Trump referred to the incident saying there were bad people on both sides and that the young men who came into that meeting looking to cause violence ran their car through the parade and killed a young lady. Trump said to that, they're very fine people. Caesar Sayoc drives a van plastered in Trump bigotry statements, and he concocted over 12 pipe bombs with intent to kill anyone who dared run against or oppose Donald Trump. Nicholas Cruz, a high school student at Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, unleashed a hail of bullets on his classmates. And it was said by one of the teachers that he was a Trump supporter. A lot of what we're seeing, it feels like we're in the 1960s all over again. It feels like Jim Crow South. It feels like we're so much farther back than where we began before this man got elected. He has emboldened people to blatantly act out these violent attacks. The police force desperately needs some reform. I'm not saying all cops are bad, But what I am saying is that the police force gives people license to open fire on anyone that they assume is guilty, assume is up to no good. And unfortunately, the people they assume are up to no good are African American. You know, I believe social media amplifies the rhetoric of the MAGA folks. It amplifies the rhetoric of hatred and bigotry. Whereas there have been quite a few presidents who were racist, but they didn't have the social media platform that Donald Trump has. They didn't take to Twitter every 20 minutes to empower an entire group of people who hate. The hardest part about hearing these stories in the news is the silence we hear from the Evangelical Church. I myself firsthand witness to the complete willful ignorance of pastors and leaders of Christian circles and churches when these incidences were happening, chose to either say nothing or chose to stand with the police to say that we stand with blue. We back the blue, the thin blue line, and they wave that flag proudly, saying we support our police force. I heard many people justify the actions of police officers who opened fire on children. Tamir Rice was 12 years old when he was shot in cold blood. That officer faced no charges. And it's the church, certain circles now, the Evangelical Church, saying that there must have been a good reason why that officer opened fire. Whenever this is happening, there's a good reason for it. That officer wouldn't just kill someone just because. And they choose not to look at the issues we have with race in this country. And we desperately need to hear an answer from the church of how people should respond when these things happen. Jesus spoke about justice. God values justice. Yet so many people die without receiving justice, without their murderer going to jail because they happen to wear a badge. It seems to me that the Evangelical Church, they would prefer to have our diversity when it comes to the website and when it comes to the video that they broadcast on Sunday mornings through social media. They would rather have diversity represented in their flyers when they're trying to get as many people in the door as possible. But when it comes to standing beside those same Black Christians, those same Black brothers and sisters, suddenly now we turn a blind eye. I've actually been in churches, church services, where they stand and declare that Trump is God's man, that Trump was elected by God's divine will, not realizing that their own biases were shaping the way they vote simply because of party line, party affiliation. They didn't care the awful things that have come out of his mouth, the awful statements that he's made, the blatant disregard for human life if it has a black skin or a brown skin. They don't care, because as long as he's running on that Republican ticket, and as long as it doesn't affect them personally, white Christians are happy to vote for Trump, and they'll do it again. If we don't stand up and make a difference, we have to make our voices heard with our votes. This election is so important, people, not only because of the type of man that he is, but also because it is speaking against what divides us and seeking for unity. United under the simple fact that every human being, every human life has value, and every human being is entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is what our country was based upon. There are certain rights and freedoms that we all deserve as American citizens, but not all Americans are treated the same. Not all Americans have justice. The vote is huge. The vote is important. Number one, my brothers and sisters, our ancestors died to give us the ability to walk into that polling place and make our voices heard in Washington. And we cannot take it for granted. We cannot lose hope. We cannot become apathetic and say that it doesn't matter. Let me tell you something, your vote does count. You know how I know? Because we stood up in record numbers for Barack Obama. We couldn't believe that we actually had a candidate that looked like us. This beautiful black family came into the White House. They made it there because we made our voices heard that, yes, we wanted something different. We wanted change that we could believe in. We had hope that we could really believe in when we elected Barack Obama. And now this is the aftermath of it, because there were so many people who could not stomach the idea of a minority in the White House making decisions for the entire country. They didn't want things to change. They liked the good old boys club, the GOP. And so in record numbers, they came out and they answered back with this guy we got now. Number 45, right? Well, we got to do it again. We got to make our voices heard. I know that the candidates that we have are not always ideal. Let me tell you something. There is no ideal candidate. But I have to believe that there is someone better than who we've got now. Someone way more competent. Someone who actually cares about all Americans. So please make your voice heard on Election Day. Not just for the presidential elections, but all of your local elections. Because it's time to answer back. It's time to speak. But we also have another way to answer back to the discrimination that we face in this country still to today. It is our dollar. African Americans, we have incredible buying power. We spend roughly about $1.2 trillion in industry. We are shopping, we are buying homes, we are buying vehicles, we are using goods and services to the tune of $1.2 trillion. Now here's the issue with that. You know, yeah, we've come up. A lot of us are well educated, we're well paid, and we got a nice home to show for it. Our kids are in private school. You know, we got it going on. We got the good hair, we got the good clothes, the good shoes. But here's the thing. We have to stop financially supporting organizations and companies that do not value our lives. It's just that simple. We have to stop financially supporting organizations and companies that do not support our quality of life. They'll happily take our dollars, but they will not stand with us when it comes time for equality. We've come so far just to even compete. But there are still so many people that don't want to see our community succeed. They want to keep us in the ghetto. They want to keep us in schools with outdated materials and understaffed, with not enough teachers and overcrowded classrooms. That's what they want for us. Section 8 housing and government assistance. That's what they believe we're worth. And we need to take our money and give it to people who support our causes and who do not stay silent when these human lives are senselessly taken in the streets. I mean, come on, people. These incidences, these names that I've called out, these were videotaped. All the way back to Rodney King. Rodney King was on videotape being beaten by a mob of police officers. Yet those men still face no charges. They clearly are sending a message that our lives are not as valuable, but we know the truth. We know that we have just as much right to be here in this country as anybody else. We are American citizens, and I'm no longer just saying Black lives. No, American citizens, because that is who we are. And as American citizens, we have rights. We have a constitution. We have laws that belong to us just as much as them. The Karens of the world who call the cops, you know, they fully exercise their rights, and they know that their rights will be upheld. But we don't necessarily do the same. Well, it's time for us to stand up for what is ours. This is not to say we need to strike with violence or take to the streets and mob or anything like that. All I'm saying is let's be smart. Let's use our buying power to support companies who support us. You know how to do research. Get on your computer, get on your phone, and find out those companies that you've been supporting. What do they really think? What are they saying? What are they saying on Twitter? What are they saying on Instagram when these incidences are happening? You know, I think it's interesting how every time I turn on my TV or anytime I watch a video online, they say, we're in this together. They're talking about we're in this together for, you know, this pandemic. But are they in this with us? Are we in this together when lives are taken senselessly in the street? And we really have to ask ourselves, which companies truly deserve our money and which ones don't? It's time to shut it down.